Today I'm looking at this. I've actually got a pair of these old speakers that came out of the local hall. I've just got to test them and see if they're any good for anything. There's a couple of an old amplifier and a... Oh yeah, there we go. Plenty of cobwebs on it, not surprising. So it's actually a two-way speaker. Tweeter doesn't move at all, but probably not meant too much. They're pretty old by the look of it. In fact, they've got an AWA brand name on it. Means they would be pretty old. I'm almost tempted to... That's a bit of screwdriver in that. Pop the woofer out and actually see what's inside these things. Possibly some old Plessy or roller drivers made in Australia, at a guess. But yeah, really just got to test them and see if they're at least in working order. And there's an old, I think, Pioneer amplifier, 70s one, and they've just been sitting on the shelves. No one really knows when they were last used, probably over 20 years ago or something. Maybe more. Probably was the 70s when they last used them, just about, but... Yeah, I've seen those numbers on speakers before, but it hasn't got a label on it to say where it came from. I doubt there's even a crossover in this. There might be some sort of... Oh, look, they just run the wire up through there. That's a bit of a weird... Why on earth would you do that? That is rather strange. But yeah, I expected to see some sort of branding on these things. These washers are a bit corroded. They got the old, like, copper-looking coating on them, but obviously been a bit damp in there. Oh, they could have been like that before they went to the hall, I guess. Someone's obviously donated some of their old equipment or something to help the place out. But yeah, it's always interesting to look. These sort of things used to be around in the old days and you just wouldn't take any notice of them really, but now it's rare to see them. They're probably not particularly good speakers though. It does have a cap on it, an old Elna Elite cap, bipolar, 50 volt, 3 mic. Yeah, nothing on here either. Sure, I've seen those numbers on something before. It's got the old cork backing, probably genuine real cork. So it's something you don't see very often anymore. Now, was it the way that went, or have I rotated this bit? I think I've rotated it a bit. Probably a good thing given all the stuff coming off that cork. It's probably a good thing we don't see them. And cardboard around there. So yeah, nothing particularly interesting about those. I don't think... Oh, do they have anything about wattage ratings or anything? 56326/1 6TA-C8. What on earth is that lump in the back of it? Oh, they both had some sort of pressing on it. It's got some sort of white stuff sprayed on the back and then some numbers. Oh, this is maybe 60s or 70s. Oh, it didn't smell too good either. It's that sort of era I would guess these were made. Probably still work fine, but I don't think they'd be rated at more than about 10 watts if you're lucky. Probably not only half of that. And then I've used a bit of cardboard tube, I think, for the bass reflex port. There's a few cobwebs and stuff in there. Acoustics of the whole aren't much good anyway, so not much point having a stereo system in there at the moment. But we might as well check these things out, at least we know what condition they're in and whether they want getting rid of or keeping or whatever. Possibly selling. I don't think these speakers would be worth anything to anyone, but you never know. They've got these feet on them that are old handles or knobs, I should say, off like kitchen drawers or something. So a bit of bush mechanics going on there, but not a bad idea, I guess, if you want to sit them up for some reason. up off the ground or the floor or something. I guess probably more for the protection of the speakers than anything else. As you can make some feet out of some knobs. Old spun wooden ones. But yeah, interesting look inside it. Anyway, like I say, you don't see a lot of this gear around anymore. It used to be tons of it around. But most of it's long since been chucked out. Probably the AWA badge off it's about the most exciting thing on it. Why does that want to go? Oh, there's a couple of dowels to locate. I didn't realise there's one at both ends. So you kind of got to... Yeah, that's it. Probably get that bottom one in and then swing it across to get the top one in. So I guess we'll get a rough idea of the impedance. So it does say 8 ohm. Does it say there's more on? I don't know if those screws come out. Oh, I guess they're only screwed into the wood, aren't they? Someone's marked it with a little X, so maybe that's just for the positive terminal or something. Oh yeah, someone's scratched a plus. Oh, so that's the X is just another plus, probably just on an angle. They've done a weird job of drilling holes here. 8 ohm system model HF104. Don't know who's stuck that label there, but that was a pretty silly spot. Unless someone's modified this after, but I think they've done it in the factory. They've just kind of drilled a bunch of random holes and a slot with a drill by the look of it. But still, I've seen modern JBL speakers with dodgier woodwork in them than that. So you can't really blame them for just basic speakers back then, back in the 60s or 70s, but still not the most professional. But yeah, what a silly way to put the label on right where the terminal's going to go over the top of it. But I would assume these came out with some sort of old AWA amplifier. So I guess we'll see what they measure. They should measure somewhere around the 8 ohms, even though it's an impedance rather than a resistance. So I guess in this thing, yeah, great big long bits of wire with them. I might get those tidied up. They've got to be tidied up anyway because they're all just in a great big mess, and they're around my chair and tying knots to themselves, as they always do when you don't tidy them up. Yeah, just a great big knot. Oh, let's get them somewhere. I wish people would put things back properly, but anyway. Oh, this is probably my fault for just dragging them off the shelf and chucking them aside. That's one of them. So I got little spade. Oh, they're actually more like automotive connectors. Huh. Don't know what's on the back of that amp. I haven't really checked, but I would have thought it'd be screw terminals like these, or the little spring terminals. Not a good idea to have so much wire stripped off, because unless you're going to put it right under, but these were nearly shorting out when I took them off. Do we have a polarization? I think this cable, that little stripy bit, is the indicator. So I'll put that on the positive since it's the marked one. Not that it'll matter for testing, but yeah, if you wrap those wires right around, they're not too bad. But these were just about touching each other, maybe just because they've been pulled on a bit. But people don't realise how bad it is if you short your speaker terminals out. It can blow the output of the amp. That's not too bad. Now I guess get the old test amp on. And we need to plug the CD player into it. And that's the amp outputs. Oh, of course they're RCA, aren't they? So I need my RCA test lead. And I guess we'll just try and... I better not chop those off just yet until I know what the amp's got on the back of it. Someone probably put them on there for a reason, so I can just wrap around. And we just got to be careful not to short them out. Because they'll be just dying to get together and short out. They always seem to move together. Well, we've got some sort of sound there. A bit scratchy maybe. Possibly a little bit scratchy, and yeah, pretty terrible frequency response by the sound of it. But they work. Well, that one works. Let's see what the other one does, I guess. I might take that cable off, I think, and might as well be packed away properly if we're going to keep it. Pull that end off, did I? So that one's good. Yeah, still got the thing over the label a bit. Again, plenty of cobwebs, but otherwise looking okay. Oops, sound like I broke that. It's just a bit dodgy there. Pretty flexy. God. Not the best made things on earth, that's for sure. Yeah. I wonder what that trouble is. Cable polarised, and I don't think I even checked the other end what one was what, so. But if you're going to put it in a proper installation or whatever, definitely pays to get your positive or negative marked and make sure they're both the same on the amp, so you don't get your speakers out of phase. Doesn't really matter which way they go, as long as both channels go the same way. Though with a lot of these older systems you don't really notice if they're out of phase, but on some things you do. Basically if one speaker's going in and the other cone is going out at the same time, the waves in the air basically cancel each other. One's compressing and one's doing the opposite of compression, whatever that is, I guess. Like a low pressure thing, negative pressure. And when the two meet, they can basically become zero. So a wave of one polarity and a wave of another polarity just become a non-wave. Okay, just connected. Yeah, that seems to be okay, as expected. Pretty rare these things ever had issues unless someone damaged them. They seem to go forever otherwise. So now we'll get rid of that. Let's loop up the old cables. And do something to knot them up, so that they don't get a knot again. Not in it anyway. There. That's probably not as neat as doing it the other way, but anyway. At least they're under control and not getting tangled up. So the next part is a Pioneer SA-500. Bit of a classic amp. There was quite a few of these around once upon a time. And we seem to have a microphone hanging off it. So maybe this was for calling quiz nights or something. A Super Sound M327 dynamic mic. And what has someone done with it? They've modified it, I think, to go... What have we got here? Just a mono connection. And just an adapter from 3.5 to RCA. So there's only one channel, I guess, running off it. What on earth have they done with the mains cord here? It's got a weird external clamp thing on it. Ah, there's the speakers. God, no wonder they had automotive spade connectors on it. Are they, what on earth sort of connectors are those? They're not the 2-pin DINs, but kind of the same arrangement. I wonder if they had their own special connections. That's a bit odd. Guess there's nothing here that tells us when this thing was made, but I think pretty sure this is a 70s amp. 2 speaker systems used. The impedance at each of the speakers should be 8 ohms or more. Now it's actually got now little wooden bits on the end. I assume that's factory. And yellow insulation tape wrapped around it. I guess it'd be interesting to have a look inside this. This would be a really low powered amp, I would think. I might actually cut that off, except my scissors have vanished. Side cutters will do. Let's get rid of all this excess junk. Get rid of that tape. And yeah, the other thing with this is all the, besides the volume control, all the little, the knobs near coming off too, but all these little front aluminium bits are falling off. I think that's a common issue with these things. Possibly why someone got rid of it, because it was looking a bit iffy. That's a bit bent. So yeah, not the greatest design where it's got the balance is part of the dual knob system. God, I can barely separate them. They rotate alright together, but not separately. And yeah, another dirty old condition. But it'll be interesting to see what's actually inside this, but it's going to be TO220 transistor output. Again, probably good for 5 to 10 watts or something. They're sort of overrated as a vintage hi-fi thing if you ask me, but I guess they've got the look of a nice vintage amp, but they didn't, in my opinion, didn't sound very good and were low powered. I would have much preferred to build one of the electronic kits of the day, or maybe some of the later ones, I guess the 80s ones, then fork out for one of these things, which are pretty underrated, most of them. Yeah, TO220 outputs, 2SD234, so this is just like the Sony one that has the same, yeah it does, so they're both 2SDs. Fuses are intact, which is a good sign. A lot of corrosion there, or rust, so that ain't too good. Right near the, oh, this has got one of these horrible rotary power switches. I don't know if my other amp's a Pioneer, I think it is. It's a SX-450 or something, I think, and that switch has gone in it on the back of the rotary part. But I did manage to buy another one that's in terrible condition, but I'm hoping the switch in it's good, because then I can get my one going. I only used it as a test amp. I think I bought it for about $10 from the tip shop, and just used it in the workshop and just I used to turn the bench power on and off every day anyway, so it just came on. And you had a receiver to give you an audio signal out of the tuner, and you could also plug in line level into it to amplify it up to speakers and stuff, so it was a handy test unit. I just use it as a display piece now, just with the dial lit up, and that's about it. But it would be nice to get it going, because they're actually worth a bit of money now, some of these old Pioneers and stuff. Probably better to get it going and pass it on to someone who actually wants to use it. But yeah, that's not in the greatest condition, but there's very little to it. One little amp board, one little probably phono preamp, and equalisation, I'm guessing. There might be a general preamp, then you've got your tone control board, a lot of input selection switches and heaps of wiring. I mean, this is all the old hand-wired, hard-wired. That's why they used to cost so much back in the day, relatively, because someone had to sit there, ladies in the factory or whatever, and solder up all these wiring harnesses and stuff. Once I got all this stuff on one or two boards and a couple of connectors between them, much cheaper. So even the electrolytic main filter cap is mounted to the chassis. So this is, you know, it's an early design because it's almost built like a valve piece of equipment. What on earth is that thing? There's a 4 5-pinned ceramic thing. Almost looks like an early integrated circuit that they used in masthead amplifiers or something. But I doubt it's actually an integrated circuit. What does it do? It comes 1 lead off that, 2 leads off this DIN connector, 3 leads off the DIN connector. It looks like 1 goes to this other line output tape record. Don't ask me what that is. It might just be a resistor array or something. Rather weird looking component. So I guess the usual thing is to check it for DC on the output. Or first I'll check the mains cord to make sure that actually feels like it's, if I can get this microphone untangled. Another bit of mess that someone's left there. So I always run my hand down just to make sure it hasn't been cut or anything. Ancient old plug there with the wrong piece there, but it's well fitted by the look of it. Should really check if they're active. I think the active and neutral are in the right spots. Oh, there's the transformer, make a little bit of a buzz sound. Oh yeah, we're on. That would have been the inrush to the well, it just did it again, so you wouldn't think it'd have multiple inrushes to the transformer, but they do have a bit of a current inrush. And we've got these weird speaker terminals. I guess what I need to do is make sure I've got all -3 volts there. I don't know if this is a, oh, it could be a capacitive output. It looks like it probably is. It's so old, it's actually got electrolytic capacitors. Yeah, I think I've got to switch it around to speaker B, and we get the same there. So that's probably just from them being charged up. So yeah, it's pretty old school if it's got the caps, but I'm guessing they're not power supply filters because they're near these fuses, which I assume are speaker fuses. Or are they? That seems to have one red wire coming in, so maybe not. So they might be power fuses, but it still doesn't mean these caps aren't speaker. Where do these terminals go? This is a problem. 4 and 5 have wires going off them, but one's white and one's blue, I think. Well, they wouldn't. Yeah, the actual speaker terminals must go back to that speaker switch. Then we've got a headphone socket would be the next thing, I would assume. So you can turn it off, turn both speakers off and have headphones running. But I don't know what colour wires are going into that without taking the bottom off this thing. I don't see, yeah, it's got to be some of these terminals as speaker outputs because there's no other. That's going to the collector of that transistor, and I'm guessing, I think it's a collector in the middle. The other collector goes there to probably the positive rail. So maybe the emitter, yeah, that possibly joins the collector of that one. And it's got the old nylon screws. They got nuts on the back? No, they don't. They're just actually held onto the chassis with nylon screws. I haven't seen them for a while. And we have a light there, which I don't think comes on. So the old incandescent 6.3 volt light globe, probably that's well blown. So this has done either a lot of hours or maybe it's been bumped around a bit and that's what took it out. I think I'm game to see if I can just fold these wires over and connect to it. I don't think it's going to do any damage to the speakers. Yeah, you can actually fold the wires over and sort of push them in there because it's like got a couple of terminals that can press in on the wire. Now let's see what the volume is. Always check that. Speakers off. Bit scratchy, no surprises there. Which one am I on? That one. Just careful I'm not touching any 240 volt stuff here, because they often have dangerous live terminals in them. Yeah, the voltage is down to 0. No smoke coming out of the speaker, so I guess that's okay. Yeah, a few live terminals there. Live terminals on the back of the mains voltage switch, and looks like it's got a couple of sockets. Yeah, a couple of these old American style 110 volt sockets for the, even though here there'd be 240 volts coming out of those, so they're switched. So your turntable and tape deck or whatever run off them. So you've got to watch all those. So there's a lot of bare wires, and they're right near the speaker terminals and stuff that are potentially lethal if you touch them. I've got earth leakage, so chances are I'll just pop the earth leakage breaker here, but still best to always just treat everything as dangerous and keep in the habit of treating it as dangerous, because if you get blasé around this stuff, that's when it gets you. As I hook the other speaker up, just discharging that cap. That one's coming out now. So yeah, I don't know what the story is with these. I don't remember seeing those speaker terminals before, but maybe I didn't take much notice and just did the same thing. Oh no, I've seen these amps around before. They were a fairly common model once upon a time, I think. Ooh, that definitely needs a clean. Stereo, monitor, loudness, bass back to flat, treble back to flat. They actually aren't scratchy by the look of it. Go to auxiliary. Now where is the auxiliary? Oh, let's go to tuner, I guess I'll do. I don't really care, as long as it's not the phono input. So we're on, what did I say, tuner? Loudness certainly adds a bit of bass. Just a couple of tape monitor switches. Must have 2 separate tape inputs, I guess. What do we got? Oh, phono 1, phono 2, tuner, auxiliary. So maybe it's got tape inputs that you have to hit the monitor. Yeah, something just gave way. Speaker disconnected, and now the other one's probably gone. Tape 1, oh yeah, tape 2. That's the one with the DIN connector as well. Yeah, so that's, yeah, they call it monitor rather than play. And phono 1 and 2, well, that's pretty fancy if it's got 2 phono inputs for the day, but they were probably more common than tape, but you probably might have had a reel-to-reel and a compact cassette. Puts out a decent sound. The switch is pretty dodgy as well. Yeah, knob's pretty dicky. Doesn't want to stay on her well, so she's a bit rough. Yeah, respectable little amp. Not getting warm yet. So I guess the only other thing to check is the microphone, which should measure fairly low ohms. 500 odd. Something's a bit dicky here, I think. This homemade adapter is not the best. Maybe one of the leads is broken off on that end, seems alright. Seems to be this bit here. Yeah, there it goes again. Into the hundreds of K. So maybe the lead itself on this mic is broke is another. Yeah, I think that might be dicky. if I pull on that it goes. So I think that microphone is probably cactus, although with a, instead of having an adapter there, you could just cut that lead off and put a RCA straight onto it, would probably be the way to go. It's only a 3.5mm plug on the mic anyway, which isn't standard anymore. It was only really for like boom boxes and little cassette players and stuff, you'd have a 3.5, so well, that's tested, the amp's tested, so the amp could do with a quick service. A few cleans of pots, it needs a new lamp. Man, that's rusty. That's another issue with it. I think that lamp just slides off. Oh yeah, she's got the silvery inside, so she's well and truly in the plastic split on it a bit there. It probably tells you what it is. I don't know if it comes out of that bit of tubing or not. Usually they got their rating marked on them, but of course it's somewhere where I can't see it. And I don't think there's much point looking after this old thing anymore. It's not going to come off anyway. And it's gone as hard as, trying not to break the globe, I guess. Don't really want broken glass everywhere. That's all corroded as well. And if it did have its rating on it, yeah, I think it's right under the corroded bit, which would be typical. Usually they're stamped into the metal, but I guess the thing to do would be to test it. Probably not much point even putting that back in there. Is it going to be AC or DC? Who knows? Probably AC. It looks like it's... I can see one wire goes straight into the transformer. So it's probably an old style transformer with a 6.3 volt winding. Another leftover from the valve days. So I see a 7.89 volts open circuit. So I think we can say that's a 6 volt globe. Some of these did use 8 volt. I guess you'd have to load it down to see, but anyway, I might just put the globe itself back in there, so not much point. It's, you can see from the threaded socket how big it was and stuff, but in case someone wants to take it, I can almost see a rating on there still. It's just very poorly stamped in there, but someone might want to take it somewhere and ask for a replacement. And if they don't know what they're talking about, they just take the old globe. I forget even what sort of ES size those things are now. Could probably find it in an old catalogue somewhere. So yeah, this, with those silver bits missing off the knobs and one dodgy knob, it'd probably clean up alright other than that, but it's not exactly going to be a hi-fi enthusiast amp, this one, I don't think. Again, maybe why they got rid of it, maybe the bits started falling off and it didn't look very good, so someone donated it to the hall. And yeah, you know, 30 years ago or something, this thing would have been as old as the hills anyway. In the 90s or something, this would have just been old junk by then. To most people. A few people still like the old one, but yeah, these are sort of getting relegated to the shed and the like. Oh, well, at least I can give them a report on that one, see what they want to do with it, whether they want to bother. I might even end up with it yet, who knows. But it does want a little bit of work. And that old microphone can go back with it. I might tie that up as well, rather than having all this cables and stuff going everywhere. Amazing how many knots they get into. I should just wrap that around the mic itself. Might do. Might as well, I guess. Loop that around itself just to hold it there. That'll do. That's a bit neater than it was. And there's one Phillips shelf system thing to look at as well. Now that I looked at that amp, I realised what this little dodgy arrangement is for. Got an extension cord socket and a like an American plug, but that would have gone into the back of that amplifier, and that would have been used to power whatever, some other music maker or something. So someone's just made that up to convert from those amp sockets to a normal Australian plug. I mean, often what people used to do if it was just a 2-pin plug is just bend the angled pins like those to straight and plug them in, but often you'd get a little bit of metal sticking out, so that wasn't the safest way to do it, but you could do that with a lot of things. But that makes sense of what that was for. It was related to the amp. That is a really old, it's a Clipsal plug there, so it doesn't even have any covering on the back of it, which of course is fine when it's plugged into the amp. And not the best strain relief, because that wire was starting to fall off. And no earth, obviously. Yeah, I wonder why Clipsal made those old things, but they did make 240 volt plugs. But yeah, that's pretty old school. That's like from the 40s or 50s probably. And that's just a standard 438 plug. But someone's cut the back bit off it, where that little thing screwed on to as a strain relief thing, so none of that's much good for anything. But yeah, I think we'll toss that away. It's a bit too dangerous.